Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update that we send out to all of our members, our donors, and supporters. And the exciting thing this week is the legislature met earlier on Tuesday, or January 9th, rather, and they are off on their long session. They have a 105-day session. Their main job is to pass a new budget. The governor has already proposed his budget earlier in December. A victory from our point of view is that the governor, for the first time, is not coming out of the gates with a major tax increase. So we consider that something of a win. We're hoping that Governor Inslee feels that the public might be at the saturation point when it comes to his tax increases. He passed a cap and trade law that's going to hit gasoline, energy prices, and of course, high sales tax, B&O taxes, business taxes, property taxes. It's all hitting everyone during a recessionary time or a time of high inflation. And so we're hoping the governor begins to be sensitive to the fact that people really are overburdened in our state. The research that we put out shows that every other state provided some form of tax relief in the last few years, even heavily blue states like New York and California. So we would hope that Governor Inslee would get that message of the national trend and provide tax relief in our state. Maybe his idea of tax relief is to not propose a new tax. So that's what he's starting off with. And then we'll see how the legislature deals with the budget as we go forward. The last point I'll make about the budget is that it is the largest amount of spending ever in the history of the state. State spending has just about doubled in the last 10 years. And as we go through the session, I'll provide more details about the numbers, but that's the overall trend. Regarding other issues, we were surprised to see that Governor Inslee is proposing to cut funding for the North-South Freeway project in Spokane. As people who live in Eastern Washington know, this project has been around forever, decades, and the state can never seem to quite deliver it for the people of that region. And here the governor is coming out and cutting it again. We have a suspicion that Eastern Washington is being neglected as the political power base of Washington moves more towards a Seattle-centered point of view. So Sound Transit projects in the Seattle area are getting tens of billions of dollars. And then here's one project that the people in Eastern Washington really need, and that just got zeroed out. He calls it a delay, but it's the latest in several delays for this project. And as we say, we think at some point the Department of Transportation has to actually deliver mobility for the people of the state, particularly in Eastern Washington. The North-South Freeway is a good example of that. It's become practically legendary in the area that this project is always pending and never completed. So we would hope that the governor would put funding into that in a fair way, the same way that other projects are funded around the state. Another item that we looked at was Superintendent of Public Instruction Reichdahl made a major speech about public education. Of course, he really only had one theme, which was more money to put into the public system. He didn't address learning loss particularly, or the fall in academic standards, or critical race theory being introduced into the schools, or the neglect of parents who have concerns about curriculum and what's being taught in the schools. His message was primarily about money. As researchers, we were curious to see how he would pitch this, and sure enough, he came up with a creative way of saying that the schools need more money. Again, public school education has just about doubled in the last 10 years. In fact, education spending has gone up from about $9 billion to roughly $16 billion, $18 billion right now. We spend over $18,000 per student in public education today. That's more than the funding in most private schools. So we think by any objective measure, the public system has plenty of money. Nope, our superintendent is creative enough to come up with a metric, and he says that education has declined as a share of the total budget, also that it's declined as a share of the percentage that's spent in most other states. Again, we're researchers, we understand how to crunch the numbers. And if he wants to look at it that way, that's fine. What we think is important is, do schools have the resources to educate children? It's obvious that the answer is yes. So lack of money is not the problem. Superintendent Reichdahl can spin it however he likes. I mean, he will always find a measure someplace else on the planet that spends more money as a percentage basis than Washington State. We think at some point that rhetoric or that exercise is irrelevant. and that instead what matters is our kids getting the resources that they need to learn. Given the fact that over 50,000 families have left the public system, we think that real reform is needed, particularly in the form of school choice. So we're impressed with Arizona, which just moved to a universal school choice system. We think that kind of reform would get parents back in the game and would inject more energy into our education system, create innovation, charter schools, online education, private tutoring, all the ways that kids can learn without being locked into the monopoly public system. So we'll continue to track that. Regarding legislation, we've been following what the Democratic leaders in the legislature have put up as priorities. They have announced, for example, Senator Billig, the Senate Majority Leader, has said that workforce issues will be tops for him. We're waiting to see what the details of that are. We do know that the state is short on qualified employees in certain areas. Our analysis shows that part of that is a result of the governor's pretty harsh vaccine mandate restriction, which is still imposed on public employees. Hundreds of public employees have lost their job over this issue, but that's been targeted in particular areas where the ferry system is short on deck crew to run the boats, and snowplow drivers and the Department of Transportation heavy equipment operators are particularly impacted. And during the winter season, that is affecting the public. So we're encouraged that Democratic leaders are putting focus on this. We just hope that they see where the problem really lies and do more to encourage qualified people to take state employment. Another area that we're encouraged about is the introduction of SB 5158. This is to propose a tax transparency website that would be set up by the state, an idea that the Washington Policy Center has promoted for years. Most people don't know that they may live in a jurisdiction that's covered by as many as 10 different taxing districts: library district, port district, school district, a county, a city, and then of course there's the state itself. So it becomes hopelessly confusing to know who is taxing you and how much is it. So this website, you would be able to put in your address, your zip code, and it would tell you what public officials are responsible for imposing taxes on you, and then how much that added burden is. It's a simple transparency exercise and creates accountability. We also believe it promotes our democracy because it allows people to know where their money is going. So we'll hope that that bill gets a hearing and that it's acted on. Another positive reform is that the Senate passed rules that forbid a kind of an insider tactic called title-only bills. This is an evasion that lawmakers have used in the past to get around different restrictions and deadlines that there are in the legislative session. A member introduces a bill, which is a blank sheet of paper. It has a number at the top and nothing else, no content. That bill is available through the legislative process, and then right at the very end of the session, I mean, literally 48 hours before they adjourn, leaders will throw text into that blank bill and then pass it. Nobody has a chance to see it. We have argued for years that this practice should be banned, and the Senate this time did do that. So we're happy about that. The House still allows this tactic of title-only bills to be used, and so we'll be seeing how that plays out. Next is emergency powers reform. Senators Linda Wilson and Mark Mullet, a Democrat and a Republican, working together, introduced SB 5063, which would provide reasonable oversight of the governor's emergency powers. We just all experienced a world of what one-man rule looks like over the last few years. Governor Inslee used emergency powers for 975 days with no check or oversight. All of the lockdowns, mandates, school closures, all those decisions were made privately by the governor sitting in his office. And then he just announced what the rule is going to be for the rest of us. We lived under that system for years. The legislature, Democrats and Republicans, had absolutely no part of it. This bill would provide a 30-day limit on exercising powers and provide overview by lawmakers, and would at least allow the four main leaders in the legislature to act as a review of what the governor is doing, even when the legislature is not in session. This is very common sense. The bill is even called the Balance Act, to try to bring balance within the government. Same system that's used in virtually every other state. The surprising thing is that Senator Sam Hunt, who's the chair of the Government and Elections Committee in the Senate, announced the day after the bill was introduced that that bill is dead. He refuses to schedule it for a hearing or to consider it. So for a bill to be killed within 24 hours of being introduced is anti-democratic, we think. I mean, why not? Yeah, I'm not even sure if he read the bill, but they just came out and said immediately, we're not going to consider this reform. That is not the case in the House. There's still a possibility that the House will consider emergency powers reform. But in any case, we hope that SB 5063, the Balance Act, gets consideration and gets a hearing at some point, even though the chairman of the committee has left it off his list of bills. That decision may change, and we hope it does. Last issue I'll touch on is House Majority Leader, or House Speaker rather, Lori Jenkins, a Democrat, announced her concern about licensing laws and regulations that prevent people from getting jobs and entering into professions that need a state license. We have pointed out, again, for years, we've done studies with other states, that it is so cumbersome to just get permission to work in Washington state in whatever training or profession that a person has. It can take months, tens of thousands of dollars before a person is allowed to engage in their profession. Lori Jenkins pointed out that over time, there's a point where we stop becoming competitive and it stops people from entering into a particular industry. And we agree with that. So we hope that streamlining the permitting process happens, particularly as people move here from other states. They may be trained in what they do, nursing, for example, and then they come to Washington state and find that they're not allowed to take a job. So we're in favor of streamlining that. And the last item is we're excited about our Olympia Day, which is coming up on January 25th. Our research staff, our president, and many of our board members will be in Olympia to talk with legislators and provide our information. We are always a resource every day for committees and debates and independent information that we think lawmakers should have, and we'll continue to do that. And with that, I will be back in about a week with a new update on what's going on in Olympia. Thanks.